Promises, promises. They've been promising us a hot new cartridge for about 3 years now. The 277 Fury. It's a 270 that's short and fast and high pressure and hybrid, a steel head. It's the new hybrid cartridge that's supposed to set the world on fire and change everything. But is it ever going to happen? Well, we've got the inside scoop on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors. A spokesperson for Sig Sauer itself is telling us what to expect out of the 277 Fury and the Cross rifle. Coming up on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors. Well, yep, that's the thing, guys. There's a new cartridge, believe it or not, but this one isn't just new. It is threatening to change the whole cartridge world for us. And that's at least what Patrick says from Sig Sauer, and he's got the inside scoop. We're going to hear from Patrick and get the information on whether or not this 277 Fury with the high 80,000 PSIs of chamber pressure is going to eat barrels for lunch. If it's going to be viable as a hunting cartridge, if it's ever going to be introduced, will we ever see rifles for it? And will this be a one-off, or can we expect to see more developments along this line? Let's dive into all of that on this episode, because even if you're not interested in a new high-pressure cartridge and or rifle, or not interested in a 270, you may be interested in what's going to happen down the line, because Patrick is suggesting this might not be the only 80,000 PSI cartridge we see in the near future. But before we get to Patrick, let's just do a little background. The U.S. military was looking for a new cartridge and rifle. They've been running that 5.56 NATO now for a long time, and as you know, it's just a puny little 223 Remington with a heavier bullet on it generally, but it's not what most soldiers would consider a big punch on the enemy. And given new developments in armor and whatever, I think they're just looking for something with more punch, but still in a fairly compact package. And high velocity is always a good way to get deeper penetration. I've seen it. 220 Swift on a steel plate penetrates farther than a 30-06 with armor-piercing bullets. So velocity seems to matter a lot, and that's, I think, what the military was looking for. But they also want to keep things kind of small, not too heavy, and compact, not real long. All of that is the project that they set out to develop, and Sig Sauer won the contract, and I think they have solidified it. I think the military has said, we are going to get their rifle. I think they call it the Spear. I'm sure that's not what the military is going to call it. It's an auto-loading rifle. It looks roughly like an AR-15 style, but it's fully automatic, or a probably select fire, I would imagine. But it is chambered for this 277. So the military is calling it the 6.8 by 51 millimeter. And that is because, looky here, pretty much the same thing as the 308. It's the 308 neck down to 27. So it's just a Wildcatter's 270-08, been around for a long time. No one's ever picked it up and made it a commercial cartridge, but boy, awfully close to the performance of 7mm 08 Remington. Now you'll notice, if you look carefully, the shoulders pushed forward a little bit on this 277 Fury. So it's got a little bit more powder capacity. That's not the big deal. They straightened the wall, it looks like, a little bit on it too, so there's a little less taper. Whatever they did, it's designed for the military. It's got to work in machine guns as well as rifles. So they've got it figured out, and 80,000 PSI is the buzzword. That's what's been out for a long time on this thing. And Patrick, when he comes up here and talks to us, has got some news about that too. But I think as hunters, we are going to be interested in this in comparison to the good old 270 that's been around since 1925. Competing against this newcomer. That's pretty interesting. Darn near 100 years old, and it's up against the newcomer. How well will it do? Well, here's the deal. By increasing the chamber pressure in this cartridge, they claim, and I guess the chronographs have said it's true, that in a 16-inch barrel with the same weight bullet, they get the same velocity as a 270 does out of a 24-inch barrel. So, wow, you're looking at 8 inches of a less barrel to haul around. And I think that's a big deal in the military. Is it a big deal for hunters? I don't know. each of us gets to decide, but I know over the years, I've sure enjoyed carrying little Model 94 lever actions with a 20-inch barrel. Seems pretty light and handy. So if we can get 270 performance out of shorter barrels, maybe it's worth it. The other thing is, of course, this is a short action and this is a standard length action, the good old 270. And some people just think, oh my gosh, you've got to have a short action. I don't think it's that big of a deal. You save a 1/2 inch length in your receiver if it's done right. So you can shave a few ounces off of your rifle, and maybe it's a little faster to cycle, but for hunting, I don't see where it's a big deal. Maybe in the auto-loading rifle for the military, it will be. So what I did was I ran some numbers and I ran some pros and cons on these. Maybe let's do the pros and cons first. So we've got the 277 Fury, and it's the next generation squad weapon system for the military, which suggests, like the 308, it's going to be pretty popular. Going to be a lot of them around, maybe. Pretty much anytime the military grabs a cartridge, it becomes really popular and it stays around for a long, long time. So that's got something in its favor. On the other side, the 270, even though it's always just been a civilian cartridge, that's been around for a long, long time. And I don't think it's going anywhere because it has been proven on just about all the game in the world. Some people think it's a little bit on the light side, but it's fast and flat without burning your barrels out too quickly, et cetera, et cetera. Just got a great reputation. So the Sig will be available in a cross rifle. I have seen this one. It looks a lot like an AR-15, but it's a bolt action. And it only weighs a little more than 6.5 pounds, which really surprised me. When you look at all the steel in an AR-style rifle, it seems like there's a lot there, but they've got the weight down. And I think having that 16-inch barrel is a big part of the deal. So that's kind of nice. And it may be available eventually in their spear rifle, which is the semi-automatic, similar to, again, the AR-15 style. So down the road, maybe you'll see that. Both of those rifles are out there. They're on the market. They're chambered for the 308 and the 6.5 Creedmoor right now. We're waiting for them to get chambered in this hot new 277. So the advantage of having that, of course, is their 8-inch, 8.5-inch overall shorter rifle, without losing the muzzle velocity. That's pretty cool. 80,000 PSI though, is that going to burn your barrel out sooner? And is it going to end up in some eruptions that none of us want to have happen? I can't imagine that much pressure is going to make rifles blow up. They'll build rifles to handle it. Whether that means it's going to be a heavier steel around the chamber, a thicker steel, I don't know. I kind of doubt it for a couple of reasons. One is, virtually all rifles are built to have a fudge factor. You know, if you've got a 270 or any of the Weatherby Magnums, a lot of cartridges out there that have an average chamber pressure of 65,000 PSI, which is pretty high, they are tested to withstand almost double that. They'll take them in the lab and they'll load up some pistol powder in one of them to make the pressures go up to 100,000, 125,000 even, and not blow that barrel or action up. So I think they build things beefily enough to withstand these higher pressures. So maybe, just maybe, your standard bolt action rifles of the last 40, 50 years, let's say, are going to be strong enough to handle 80,000. Don't put money on this. Don't quote me and say this is going to happen. This is conjecture on my part, guys. But when I look at these cross rifles in 308 and compare them to the stats of the ones that are chambered for the 277, they look like the same basic rifle and barrel. I haven't noticed that the barrels look different, heavier, or the lugs on locking lugs on the actions are different, but I haven't taken a caliper to this stuff and looked at things tightly, but just kind of strikes me that maybe we're going to get away with being able to use some of our traditional bolt action rifles chambered for these higher pressures. Remains to be seen. So I wouldn't at any rate worry about buying a rifle that's been certified for the 277 and 80,000 PSI, like that cross rifle they're coming out with from Sig, if it ever gets here. And well, Patrick is going to tell us when we can expect it, if we can expect it, if it's been changed, all kinds of good information coming up from Patrick. Now, one other thing we got to think about is ammo availability. Everybody can find 270. Everybody makes it. Great. What about this 277? Who is going to build that? Obviously, Sig will. But how long will it be before anybody else does? Because look at that thing. It has a steel head on it. That's why they can go to 80,000 PSI, because they can hang the pressures, hold those pressures back with that steel head. Now, it seems to me that anybody should be able to make that once they've got the basics down, but will they? I don't know. Something to be determined. So that is a concern. So you're going to probably have limited availability in ammunition, at least initially. And that raises the specter of, will your particular rifle and barrel like the ammo that's available? With a 270 Winchester, you can try 1, 2, 5, 25 different loads and bullets and everything else out there and find 1 or 2 or 3 that your rifle likes, most likely. Not so much when you've got a limited selection. And then there's the issue of cost. Anytime you're loading a lot of cartridges like the 308 or the 223, the prices drop because of the volume. With the 277, I don't know. All right, now what about hand loading? A lot of guys are saying, are we going to be able to hand load that with that steel base? I honestly don't know, guys, but I think the answer is yes, because we generally do not resize the head. The head doesn't expand much, if at all, on these traditional cases. So you're just resizing the neck and the shoulder and the body. So I think we will be able to hand load those, but I, again, don't know for sure. We're going to wait and see on that one as well. And then finally, it's the rifles. What are you going to buy? Obviously, the Sig Sauer Cross and maybe the Spear will be available. Will the others from commercial makers? I don't know. Another thing we have to consider. All right. So now let's look at some numbers. What I did was say, look, if I'm hunting with this thing, I don't necessarily need a 16-inch military barrel. I'll take a 24-inch barrel to maximize performance out of my 270 Winchester. Let's do the same thing with this guy and see what happens. Well, what happened, I extrapolated here, guys, but based on the velocity they're recording for a 16-inch barrel, I added 8 inches of barrel to get it up to 24, and then I figured 30 feet per second, that's a good average, of velocity increase for every inch increase in barrel. So that's 8 times the 30, and out of the 24-inch barrel, you get 200 feet per second more velocity out of this 277. That's fairly significant. I don't think it's a game changer, but it can make a difference. How much of a difference? Those are the numbers I've run here on some charts. So let's look at those really quickly. We are going to zero both of these for maximum point blank range with a 6-inch target. So our bullets shouldn't go more than 3 inches high, and that's about 150 yards. And then when they drop 3 inches below that aim point, that's our maximum point blank range. Makes it pretty easy to target animals out to 300 yards. Well, where is our maximum point blank range out of that 277? You're reaching out to a little bit past 320, just about 325 yards. That's dropping 3.63 inches at 325 yards. So I'd say 320 should be it. With the 270, you're at 3 inches to drop right at 300 yards. So you're picking up about 20 yards more reach. Big deal. Doesn't mean all that much. I wouldn't fret if I were looking at a hunting cartridge. What about wind deflection? Same bullet now, guys. We're shooting a 140 grain bullet here. We're getting 3,190 feet per second out of the Sig. We're only getting 3,000 out of the good old 270. And the wind deflection out of the 300-yard reach is 5.11 inches out of the Sig, and it's 5.55. So not even a half-inch difference on your wind deflection. But what happens at farther ranges, I really don't care as a hunter. I'm not targeting game much beyond 400 yards. Every rare once in a while, I'll stretch it out to 450, maybe 500. But I can count on the fingers on this hand, minus the thumb, how many times I've done that. I can generally sneak closer, but there are guys out there who like long shots. So let's just see what happens at 500 yards. 26.3 inches of drop out of the 277 and 31.8, call it 32 inches out of the good old 270. So there's an advantage. It's just getting to be fairly significant there. But again, you can always memorize your drop tables and all and use a rangefinder and you'll have that nailed. What about the wind deflection? That's what's going to potentially screw you up. 15 inches of wind blowing that bullet, 10 mile an hour right angle wind, 15 inches of deflection out of that 277. Remember, this is the same bullet for both of them. Good old-fashioned 270 Winchester. It's only an inch and a half, not even an inch and a half more wind deflection. So, big deal again. I don't know, guys. I'm sticking with the good old 270, but mostly because I've done most of my big game hunting already. It's not like I'm 20 years old and I'm looking for a good 30, 40-year career. But there's not a heck of a lot of difference out of those two. But there is in that lighter, shorter barrel, lighter rifle, and all the rest. So I don't know, if I were in my early 20s, I might be pretty darn interested in that. But the bigger question, I think, is going to be, is this going to spill over into other cartridges? I don't know. But right now, I would say, wait a minute, guys, we don't have to compare it just to the 270 Winchester. What about this 6.8 Western? There's the same 270 bullet. And is that going to be superior? They're both short actions. Why not just get a rifle chambered for the 6.8? Fair question. And the twist rate on these Cross rifles, I think, are supposed to be 1 in 8.5, whereas the 6.8 Western is 1.8. And I think in the Winchester rifles, they're even spinning them at 1.7 or 1 in 7.5 inches. So faster. You're able to stabilize 175 grain Sierra boat tail in the 6.8. I don't think you'll be able to do that with the Sig Sauer. Maybe, but I think it'd be more like 170 grain bullet. Not a huge difference there, but something to consider. And the other cool thing about the 6.8 is it's out there right now, guys. It's pretty much doing the same thing, but you probably do need to run it in the longer barrels to get that kind of performance. But again, a hunting barrel, 22-inch, 24-inch, pretty standard stuff. We've been doing it for years, but it is something to consider. So now let's see what Patrick has to tell us. I ran into him at the Sig Sauer booth at the Western Sportsman and Conservation Show in Salt Lake City just last week. And I said, come on, man, give me the scoop. You've been promising this Cross rifle and these 277s for how many years now? Is it ever going to happen? And are we going to burn our barrels out? How much barrel life can we expect? If we ever get these things? Let's bring on Patrick now and find out what's going on at Sig Sauer and whether or not we're ever going to see this 277 in the commercial market. Well, everybody wants to know about the 277 Sig Fury cartridge. This thing has got high pressures. It's got a steel head. It's the latest and greatest. But where is it? We've been hearing about it for about 3 years now. Yep. Patrick here has got it straight from the horse's mouth, right?
Yep. So we've been in development with this cartridge with the Army for the last couple of years. As a lot of people saw, we got awarded the contract last year. We were continuously developing some of the changes to it that the Army wanted. Plus, we were trying to make sure that the hybrid technology going forward was going to be manufacturable. We wanted to make sure that the head was going to be able to be made in volumes. So we're getting very close to that point to be able to start shipping the ammunition. And the better news even is that we're starting to ship some of the guns later this year. You'll see the 277 Spears later on in the year, and a little bit of a different gun for the 277 Cross. It'll be a black barrel, which is a nitride coating, which is part of some of the research we've been doing there. And then we're taking that pressure a little bit from the original 80,000 down to closer to a 70,000, which balances the performance gain with the accuracy gain.
So the rifle can still handle the pressures.
Correct.
At 80,000, but you're just not getting the accuracy.
Correct. As you start to load it up to that point, we were starting to see a little bit. I mean, you think about it, that you're going from that 55 all the way up to 80. You're getting a little bit in certain areas. You're getting bullet deformation. You're getting some things from that additional pressure. So we had to find that balance point. And some of the guys in the AMU were helpful with us with that. They're competing with that round, and we kind of found that sweet spot where you're getting the performance, but the accuracy is insanely good now on these things.
Oh, excellent. Yep. Now, people ask if this increased pressure is going to burn the throats out of your barrels faster.
Yep. So that's part of the reason why I had mentioned the nitride coating. It prevents a lot of the things like barrel ringing and the wear of the barrels. It certainly is a hotter performing barrel, but the stuff that we had to meet for the Army criteria, I can't say the exact rounds, but in a firing cadence that is very fast and very long, we've gotten it to last. So it does eventually over time in certain barrels, depending on who the manufacturer of the barrel is, meaning the stuff we do, we handle, and we know we can get good barrel life out of it. But in like a raw stainless and some of that stuff, it will eat the barrel up over time a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Have you a rough number on how many shots a hunter, for instance, could expect if he's not doing competition shooting? And
yeah, you certainly won't have an issue getting. So I would say you're going to get like a stainless barrel. If you buy from somebody, or our barrel, you're going to get to that 2,000, 3,000 round range before you start to see what we consider barrel life loss of 10% accuracy. So once you get past that, we call that a dead barrel. So once you
I would call that let's go hunting.
Yeah, I know. That's me too. I don't want to deny it.
All right, so like within the next year,
Yes,
anyway,
you'll start
people ought to
seeing
be
them.
looking
Yep.
for it, huh?
Yep.
There you go, 277 Fury from Sig. You're going to see it. It's actually happening. All right, there you go, folks. Patrick gave it to us straight up. I hope he doesn't get in trouble with his bosses for spilling the beans on this stuff. But I suspect he had permission to divulge what he divulged. But that's pretty exciting. A few months? Are we talking about spring or early summer? Possibly. So if you are interested in the 277 Fury with the steel head and the 80,000 PSI loads for the commercial market, that's what they're promising us. It should be available. And the Cross rifles chambered for the 277 should be on dealer shelves. So I think you might want to take a look. I'm sticking with the good old 270 myself, or maybe the 6.8. But as I said, I'm not starting my big game hunting career. You maybe are. I'm doing it. So give a hard look to that Cross. It does sound exciting if this hybrid idea that Patrick talked about spills over into other cartridges. Could we be looking at a steel head on a 243 Winchester, or gosh, even some of the old classics like a 375 H&H? Can you imagine? All you really have to do is beef up the base of those things, chamber them in rifles that can take those kinds of pressures, and we'll be adding maybe 200 feet per second velocity to a lot of the all old timers. Or more likely, will they make all new cartridges out of the new heads? They'll change things up just enough so that you can't chamber the old ones in them, or you can't chamber the new ones in the old. And who knows? That's the exciting part of it. We'll all find out here in the very near future. Hang in there. Pay attention. We may be on the cusp of a new world of rifle cartridges. Hey, I'm Ron Spomer. Hunt honest and shoot straight.